Hey everybody, it's Dream, and today we have the Daytona 500 for NASCAR. This race starts at about 3 o'clock, so I'm going to do this video tonight. Just trying to get as much information to you as quickly as I can here. So I have some drivers. First, I'm going to have some guys that are over $8,000, and then I've got another group of guys under that same price point, so that we can have a good setup of options here. So we're going to start with Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin looks in a pretty good spot today. He's starting 18th, which really gives him a nice bonus. As you can see, he typically starts pretty high throughout the season, last season, throughout the races. So I expect him to have some nice upside at this price point, and he's always a pretty good finisher. He starts back, obviously far enough back that I think he's got some nice upside here, and he will challenge for the win if he's still in the race at the end. Obviously, this race is really contentious, so sometimes guys get wrecked out, and so if he can avoid those wrecks, though, he will probably be at the top of the standings near the end of the race and at least be contending for it in the last few laps. Then we're going to look at Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch is in a similar aspect to Hamlin. His car is good enough to win the race. He is starting at the back of the pack because he crashed while he was in first place in the duels. And even though he's in a backup car, Childress has really good equipment for these type of tracks, and so I look for him to make his way towards the front as the race goes. But he may end up just staying around the back and hanging out until we get close to the end of the race, so that he avoids the wrecks as well. We'll have to wait and see what he decides to do, but I think he's a great option on the slate at his price point, especially with the starting position, because the farther back you start, the better you can get in the fantasy points from that. So I think he's in a great spot. Obviously, last season he started in the top 10 and he finished in top 10. Of course, he was in a different team then, but I expect him to contend all season long in a similar fashion. So I really do like him here. Then we're going to look at Austin Cindric. Now he starts in 6th place, which isn't ideal. Obviously, picking drivers who start in the top 10 definitely have a cap on their fantasy output because of the lack of movement up that they can really do. They can only get so many points that way, and of course, if they fall backwards, they're going to lose points as well. So that is a detriment. But he's really good at Daytona and then at these type of tracks in general. He's just a little bit limited to a starting point, but he has a guy that I do think is going to contend for the win, and so I think he's definitely worth taking a look at here. Then we're going to look at Austin Dillon. Now he just starts way too far back. He kind of rode around in the duels, and at the back he was near the front for a little while, but he got kind of shuffled to the back, and then he just kind of rode around. I think he didn't want to mess up his stuff, and honestly, it doesn't matter that much where you start in the Daytona 500 for the most part, unless you get caught up in something early. But he's just starting way too far back for his success, and with Richard Childress's package for this race, I think he's got a lot of upside, and so he's got nice potential as well because of his starting position. Then we're going to look at Ryan Blaney, and he's another guy in the top 10, but I do think he's a little bit safer than Cindric. He's got a lot of success in the past at these type of racetracks. If you think he can survive the big one, then he should be in your lineup. And that's pretty much what I have to say about that. He is really consistent at this type of track, and he's been really good in the past. So I look for him to continue that. The same goes for Chase Elliott. He's kind of in the same situation. He's actually starting right beside Blaney, so he's going to have some nice potential to win this race. I think both of them have a chance to be in the top 30 today, so I think they're both great picks. Obviously, if you think that they can avoid the big wreck that will happen in the race at some point, like they always seem to do at Daytona, then you should definitely take into consideration either one of them. So then we're going to get into the cheap options. And these guys are guys that are under $8,000. Several of them are guys that have really nice upside, and some of them are kind of punt plays. But something you can do at Daytona type tracks and stuff super speedways is you can kind of stack the back of the pack and then hope that they just ride around and avoid the wrecks, and then at the end they're going to move up a lot because of those wrecks. And so that's something you can do, and I've had some success with that in the past. So there's 6 drivers here that I'm going to talk about because they all have that kind of potential. We're going to start with Jimmy Johnson. He's pretty risky here with a new team, but Petty is the team that he's kind of part of now that, kind of grew into what they have now as Legacy Motor Club. And they've been pretty good at super speedways, so he's also a top tier driver, so I think he'll figure it out. And they've had a really fast car, uh, in qualifying and the stuff, so I think he's going to be fine. And I think he might take that approach of just kind of chilling and hanging out and be a viable option as the race goes on that can come to the front. Then we're going to look at Chase Briscoe. Now he starts in 30th place, and I actually really like him. I was going to be pretty happy with him even if he started up a little bit higher. But he's been pretty consistent driver, just in general, regardless of the type of race, for the most part, to in the last season. And so if he can continue that, he has some nice upside at the starting position as well. He did good last year in the Daytona 500 as well, so I think he's got some nice upside here. He also tends to have a car that's really fast. Obviously, Stewart Haas Racing is pretty good. They're not as great at these type of tracks as some of the other teams, but they're still pretty solid. And I think he's got some nice upside on this race. Then we're going to look at AJ Allmendinger. Now, he obviously has some ups and downs with colleague racing, but he's been pretty good as of late. And last season, he really finished off the season pretty strong for the most part. And I look for them to continue that. Obviously, they don't have as good of stuff as some of the other teams at these super speedways. But from his starting position at 29th, he can only really go up to help us. And so I do like him in this situation. I don't think he's the type of driver that gets into too much trouble either. Then we're going to look at Ty Dillon. Now Ty Dillon is in an interesting spot here because he's on a team that does pretty well at these type of tracks, which is Spire. And even though he doesn't tend to do a lot at most tracks, he does have some nice upside at a track like this. And so as long as he can just hang out in the back and ride around, he'll be there at the end. And he starts only 3 places out of the last place to start with. And we already know that Connor Daly's pretty much going to be done the moment this race starts. So I think he's going to have nowhere to go but up, and I think he's a great option to even get a top 25 position, which would really benefit us here a lot. And then we're going to look at BJ McLeod here for Live Fast Motorsports. He's an interesting spot too. Live Fast has done pretty well in the past, not quite as well as some of the other teams like 23XL or Spire or Richard Childress, obviously, but they do have some good stuff. And he tends to be at the end of these types of races, which is what you want to see. And he's had 2 top 10s and 7 starts here at Daytona, so I think that's a really good opportunity for him. And he hasn't started very well in those races either. And so this is another situation where he just looks like he's probably going to have an opportunity to have a good race here. And then I have a kind of a wild card option here, which is Travis Pastrana. Now, is super risky, but he's got nowhere to go but up. He's literally starting last place, and he's got good equipment in 23XI. Uh, Michael Jordan's team is really good at super speedways. It seems like the best thing that they are at. Bubba Wallace competes at the front, so I think he's a great option on the slate. I'm gonna mention the 4 teams I think that you have to take a look at just in general as well. We're going to start with 23XL. Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, and Travis Pastrana. Obviously, Bubba has managed to avoid lots of wrecks when he races at Daytona and Talladega, and I just look for that to continue. He's got good stuff here. They have a good team here in general. I'm not sure that I like Reddick as much today simply because his starting position and their stuff isn't quite as good as some of the other teams, but they're good. And I think Bubba has a good chance to be at the front if he can get there. Then we're gonna look at Spire. Now Spire's Corey LaJoie and Ty Dillon, and Corey LaJoie is pretty high up in their he qualified pretty well, so I don't expect him to be somebody that's really worth rostering simply because he's probably capped out at where he'll finish. But they've had some pretty good success here as a team, and they don't really crash out too much. And though I do like Ty Dillon a lot because of his starting position. Then we're going to look at Richard Childress Racing for Austin Dillon and Kyle Busch. And I really like both of those guys, as I've said in this video. With Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon, they should continue their dominance at super speedways this year. That's Richard Childress Racing. And both of them have good starting spots for the Daytona 500 to be top tier plays on this. You could see a lineup with Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon at the end of at the end of the race that's in first place. I could see that happen. And Richard Childress has got the best stuff of the big clubs when it comes to that, to these type of tracks. And then finally, Legacy Motorsport, which is formerly partly Richard Petty. Richard Petty's stuff has been good whenever, at Super Speedways, and I look for that to continue here. Um, he's got the best average finish of all the teams at the Daytona or Talladega over the last 15 races between those places. So they have a really good team here. Eric Jones, Jimmy Johnson, and Noah Gragson. Now, I don't really like Noah Gragson or Eric Jones as much, but for this race, but I do think that they have some upside as a result of the team they're on, and that they have good enough equipment to be, if they can hang on and chill out throughout the race and get to the end, then they'll have a shot. But of course, Noah Gragson tends to like to wreck sometimes. So, but I think they're still viable. So they're a very interesting team from that perspective. And then I'm going to mention one other guy. I'm going to say avoid Connor Daly. His car is messed up. He pretty much just hung out at the back the entire duel, and the reason was because his car was in bad shape. But he still made it because somebody else crashed and he passed him before the race was over. So I think that he will have some good opportunity here to be in last place. I don't expect Connor Daly to really have any chance of getting outside the top, maybe five, the bottom five, excuse me, on this track. So I also wanted to mention the two guys I like a lot at these type of tracks, and Bubba Wallace and Michael McDowell. Um, McDowell's starting position is ideal at 11th, and Bubba's is 15th, so it kind of hurts them some. But they both have a top opportunity to contend at this track, and they've had some good success here in the past. So I just want to mention that. So avoid Connor Daly like you can, like everything, and then pay attention to Michael McDowell and Bubba Wallace, even though they're a little bit uh, over their mark when it comes to the um, how much upside they have just because of this qualifying position, but they just have a lot of success here. So we'll have to wait and see. If you have any comments or questions about this slate, feel free to leave them below. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. Make sure to check out the Discord and Patreon and everything else in the link in the description. And have a nice day, guys.